This is the Tuesday workshop. I'm going to get us started here, where we meet as faculty members and anybody else from the community who wants to join us. We talk about topics that are related to entrepreneurs. And we've just been chatting about some of the Enneagram stuff that we talked about on the Entrepreneur Workshop last week. The Enneagram is a personality survey, which identifies certain tendencies. And it's always fun when we identify tendencies to dig in and figure out, what is this mess that is sitting in my mind and how can I deal with that better? And then also uncovering interesting things about, like Paul was talking about his wife or, Naomi. It's I think it's really great when people identify their personality traits earlier on in life, because I think it opens a whole new world of figuring out how to work with yourself and others. Today,
Self-understanding and self-reflection.
indeed. Today we are talking about common questions that people ask about entrepreneurship, and I did a bit of research here based on what people are actually searching for online. The first, and it's interesting that the breadth of questions that people ask, which I think some of us would not think to ask. And then there's a lot of misunderstandings that people have that show up in their questions as well. And Naomi had a great question that she had posed earlier that she wants to delve into, which is, I think, uncovers one of those misunderstandings that people have about what an entrepreneur is and what an entrepreneur is not. So I've got this list of questions. I dug up about 40, right around 40 questions, and we'll just go into these. And then if you guys have any questions that you've heard, but I think there's a handful of questions that all go together right at the top, and there's about 30,000 or more searches per month on this. And in fact, that number might be a little bit off. But the question is, what's the definition of an entrepreneur?
I think one thing I want to say before I give my answer on this is that with this question, as well as all of them, the longer I do this, the more I'm curious as to what is the question behind the question, right? When they ask a question like that, there's the words of what it says, but we don't always know the meaning. So I want to preface my answer by saying, if you are listening to this or watching this and you have searched that question, or you want to know that the definition of an entrepreneur, there's a fairly good chance I'm not going to answer it by what I say, because you may be having a different question behind the question than somebody else who searches the same question using those words. So all of that to say,
what's the definition of an entrepreneur?
What's the definition of an entrepreneur? To me, is a person who takes ownership of a situation, of their lives, and in many cases of a business as well.
Oh, okay.
Pretty simple.
What do you think, Naomi?
I think the definition of entrepreneur is someone who, it's an all-inclusive, all-in-one idea, like business idea and carrying it out team. If that makes sense.
Jason, what do you say?
I think the definition of an entrepreneur.
He's cheating. He already saw the definition.
I didn't. I'm just looking at the questions.
Okay.
I'm not cheating on this. This is off the top of my head. The definition I think the classical definition of an entrepreneur is that it's an individual who sees an opportunity, typically in the marketplace, and then goes about taking action to exploit that opportunity and create a solution for that problem.
Hmm.
It's not eloquent, but I think which gets into the second questions. What are and these three kind of go together. What's the entrepreneurial spirit, characteristics, and mindset? How would you know an entrepreneur? What's the entrepreneurial spirit or characteristics or their mindset?
Attacking every
roll-
roadblock.
Okay.
They roll up their sleeves. They accept no excuses. They make no excuses. They accept no excuses. They take the responsibility upon themselves until they can no longer handle it, and they delegate it to someone else. And they believe that I'm trying to think of well, I think it's a carpe diem sort of mentality. It's if we sit back and do nothing, we'll get nothing. If we head out there and do something, we may still get nothing, but nobody can say we didn't try.
Okay. I think one of the characteristics of an entrepreneur is ignorant optimism, meaning that an entrepreneur tends to see opportunity and be very optimistic that we can take advantage of that opportunity. We can go solve that problem. We can climb that mountain with I think, an ignorance about what it's going to take to actually do that.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the characteristics of an entrepreneur. I think that tends to, I think, be younger entrepreneurs. I think a healthier mindset is counting the cost, looking at the opportunity, breaking it down, figuring out exactly what it's going to take, and then looking at that in light of the return. What are the benefits versus the cost or return on investment? Not just money, but time and effort. Any other thoughts on the entrepreneurial mindset?
Yeah, I think just like expanding on like hitting all the roadblocks, somebody who won't be stopped. My son is one of those people. He every boundary I set for him, we found out he's on the spectrum. He hasn't been officially diagnosed, but we're finding out more and more, going down that rabbit hole. He has a solution for every boundary. Every time we set a boundary, he's like, "Oh, well we can do this and this and this, and then it's fine. Oh, we can do this and that." Like, he has a solution for every roadblock, every boundary set. He's like, "Oh, well, if that's your worry, Mom, then let's solve it like that." Instead of taking away my what is it? Privileges. Why don't we make sure that I do this and this and this? Like, he has an idea, a workaround. There's always a workaround. I think that's a very entrepreneurial thing to do, is when you have that workaround, every roadblock that you hit, everything that would trip anybody else up and be like, well, at least we tried. It's well, how are we going to get around it? You look at the Rescue on Disney Plus. It's about the soccer team that got stuck in the cave in Thailand,
Oh,
and they didn't think it was going to be possible to get him out alive. And then they were like, "Okay, we're going to have to dive these kids out. We're going to anesthetize them." And they're like, "Well, that's impossible." And it's like, "Well, what if it was possible? What if it was the only option?" And they attacked it from that front. And they all got out alive, every single one of them, because someone said, "This is impossible, but what if it were possible? How would that look?"
Yeah.
And I think that's the definition. Like, there has to be a problem solved. It's not a roadblock. It's not a problem. It's not an unsolvable situation. It's just a puzzle that needs to be solved.
Mm. I'm always drawn to, going back to ownership, what I said early on. I'm always drawn to the story of Joseph in Genesis as a blueprint for that, because no matter where he went, he was in charge, right? Even when he was a prisoner inside a prison, he was running that prison because the warden was like, I can trust this guy.
Yep.
He takes ownership of it. He's not here to serve time. He's here to serve God in this context. And therefore, I'm going to put him in charge of everything, and I'm just going to collect my paycheck and rest on my laurels. And then the Pharaoh of Egypt says the same thing. Why would I bother trying to micromanage all this stuff when I got this guy who knows how to solve everything? And that to me is like, that's why I said ownership versus ownership is distinct from the other angles that you two came at it from it, because I think if you have someone who has a sense of ownership, even if they're working the lowest possible rung position in your company, they're going to wield more authority spiritually than somebody, halfway up the chain in middle management who blames everybody else when things don't go well. And sooner or later, if you're faithful in even the simplest of roles, you will be elevated and exalted, because people are always looking for, anybody is attracted to somebody who has a sense of ownership of their job or their role. And why? Because you can trust them, because you don't have to worry about whether or not they're going to get their job done. You got to worry about all these other stragglers over here, but not this person. So anyway, I could go on about that, but that's what it takes me back to, is Joseph.
Okay. What's the difference between an entrepreneur and I feel like we should get to Naomi's question. What was it was your question, so you ask it.
Okay. It was less of a question, more of a clarification for people who get confused, because how many people have come up to you and said, hey, I own my own business. Do you want to own your own business too, working for this company?
Okay.
So the question or the thing that I would like to clarify for people is the difference between an MLM, working for an MLM. It's not owning your own business. You are a manager of a sales team. You are a salesperson managing your own sales team. Versus being an entrepreneur. And there's a huge difference. And people get conned all the time into thinking they're the same thing, and they're super duper not. So I kind of want to go into you guys and what are the biggest differences to you, an MLM versus true entrepreneurship, true ownership of a business?
Paul?
So my philosophy is this: I have known people who are exceptionally good MLM salespeople, and I would call them entrepreneurs. Not because of the distinction on how they file their taxes.
Right.
And not because they're independent contractors. Because to them, they are users, evangels, and very good at sales, very good at being ambassadors for that product or that service. And they could, they have the right mishmash in the time and place they're at of personality and experience and background and all of that. And they take it and run with it. And that's how they make their living. To me, that's entrepreneurship. That's ownership. That's the fact that somebody else also gets paid in the process. I own a business, I get paid, but I don't keep 100% of every dollar I earn. So, but those are few and far between. There's an awful lot more people who are, are getting sucked into the vortex that you're talking about there. And I think probably the first thing I would say is that if you don't have customers, you don't have a business no matter what your product is. And you have a lot of people talk about, oh, I'm starting my own business. Oh, really? How many customers do you have? None. Okay, well then right now you don't have a business. You have an idea, but you don't have a business. You don't know if that product is actually going to sell. And if it is, you don't know who you're selling it to. And if you don't know those kind of things, it's all academic. It's where the rubber meets the road, that you are offering something that the market is willing to pay for, in my mind. And you're offering it and earning a profit in the process. If you're giving it away or you're charging so low for it that it's a commodity and people don't sense any value in it, you still have a ways to go. And you can also have a very glorified job, right? You can be an owner, but your day-to-day life looks like you're an employee of the company because you're working 40 to 60 hours or maybe even more to make it happen, and not delegating when you should or could. And so then it becomes like it's handcuffs that you slapped on yourself and threw away the key. So there's all kinds of shades of gray with that, and I don't want to put anything hard and fast there, but I think probably the most important thing is, number one, are people paying for what you're offering? And then number two, are you building it to a point where it'll run whether or not you actually have your hands on it?
Which gets into another question. What's the difference between an entrepreneur and a business owner?
Getting your hands dirty instead of setting it and forgetting. Like, I feel like a business owner can delegate enough and kind of set it and forget it. I feel like anyone can be a business owner, someone who is in the thick of it, and somebody who owns a business, but they're not really involved in it. I think involvement is the difference. Is a business owner can own a business without being involved in the intricacies, but an entrepreneur is going to be somebody who they could own a business, or maybe they don't own a business. Maybe they don't own the MLM they work for, but they could still do the job of an entire sales team, as well as have people in their sales team working with them. So I think it boils down to their mindset and the involvement in the intricacies that make it all work together.
Jason, what do you say?
I think that in my experience, an entrepreneur gets back to the personality types that we've talked about before. There's the personality of an entrepreneur who wants to solve a problem and might be a terrible business owner. It's like a inventor. Entrepreneurs are very much like inventors. Managers are very much like business owners. I create versus I operate. And I think it's entirely possible to be a franchisee, perhaps, and not really have an entrepreneurial spirit. Just tell me what to do. Give me the framework. I'm going to do that day in and day out. Not really creating anything new. I'm operating something that works. An entrepreneur is willing to blaze a trail that maybe nobody else has blazed. They're on think of hiking. Go on a hike in the middle of the woods, and then through a clearing, you can kind of see, there might be a lake over there. The operators are going to say, you know what? The map says continue on. There might be a lake over there, but I'm not going to go through that because that's bushwhacking and I'm going to end up with this. I'm going to end up with that. An entrepreneur says, I might end up with burrs. I might end up with cuts. Might not be a lake. Might fail. Might be a cliff and I'll fall off. But I'm going to bushwhack because I think that that's a lake over there.
Yeah.
And we can see that, I really think, pretty clearly between the entrepreneurial spirit and an entrepreneur who starts a business, or an entrepreneur who is like, I'm going to start with this framework, but I'm going to make it my own, versus somebody who operates within an existing framework. Those, I think, are two different personality types. One I would call is more of an entrepreneurial spirit, and one is more of a business owner, which gets to, I think, the other question, which was, can you operate in a MLM or as a salesperson of another organization, owning a quote unquote business, which you probably don't own. You are a salesperson. You can operate it with an entrepreneurial spirit, or you can operate it with just the framework of do the following things and you'll be successful. Doesn't require the entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
Which gets into another question. Entrepreneur versus intrapreneur. What?
I've actually never heard the word intrapreneur.
I think many people have not. So I'll go ahead and answer this question. Entrepreneur, think of it as outside versus inside, right? An entrepreneur typically works outside the framework of an existing business. They create something new on the outside using outside resources to then create the structure of a perhaps business. Usually that's the outcome, right?
Mm-hmm.
An intrapreneur is a person with the entrepreneurial spirit, but they operate within the boundaries and with the resources of an existing business. It's an inventor who invents something in manufacturing with the resources of that manufacturing entity and then gets the patent on it, but that manufacturing entity owns that product, brings it to market. That's an intrapreneur, seeing a problem, solving that problem with the resources of an existing organization. Just because a person has an entrepreneurial spirit doesn't mean you can't do that within an existing organization. You just might have to be a better negotiator. To your point, Naomi, of your son, has an entrepreneurial spirit because he's a good negotiator.
Sort of makes me think of the parallel of when you in the movies, right? You have a producer and you have a director, and the producer is the person in charge of selling the film, acquiring the funding, making a lot of the hiring the crew, who they want to direct the film, edit the film, the cinematographer, and all of that. But then the director, they're on a tighter loop inside where they're doing the casting and the set design and the interaction, the blocking, and all of that. They're moving what actually ends up on the screen, but the producer is setting up everything that ends up off the screen outside. I think that's probably a helpful analogy for it, based on what you said there. And I would say, I think very similarly, one of the best things you can do if you're an intrapreneur is demonstrate to a company, especially a company that might be a little stuck in their ways, that there's a better way to do things they're already doing that is more cost effective, more beneficial across the board, enhances the customer experience, reduces costs, reduces time, reduces waste. That's a huge one. And when I was selling for Liberty Mutual, it was it was a period where 2013, 2014, where Facebook marketing was really starting to take on a life of its own. And they had a category in sales, for naming our lead sources, where we got them from. And I went through this mastermind. I went and invested some of my own money and went through a mastermind sprint with an insurance sales training group. And they showed me how to start doing personal branding on Facebook. And so I started doing it, and I started getting leads from it. And the next thing you know, I'm getting calls from the head office in Boston saying, would you be willing to come on a call with a whole bunch of rookie agents and teach them how you do what you do? But if I had started out there by just ringing the bell and saying, Liberty, we got to do more social media, they would have said, yeah, sure. Okay, go ahead and do it. So I didn't wait for permission. I went and did it. And then they saw the results. I'm getting all these leads from social media. I'm closing all this business. And they're like, well, let's put Edwards on this call and have him teach all the rookies how he's doing what he's doing. Not to mention that the lawyers and the compliance people would have been, wow, you can't do that. And so it's an example of being an entrepreneur inside someone else's business.
Being a rebel.
Being a rebel,
I
but
mean,
a rebel with a cause. Yeah.
Yeah, a rebel with the like. I always like to think Flick from Bug's Life.
Yep.
Because I feel like he was an entrepreneur. He was trying to, guys, there's a better way to do something. There's this thing we need to do. Let's come up with a better system. Look what I did. Look what I did, guys. This will work better. The whole thing.
So can an entrepreneur, it's another question, be a manager?
I think so. I wouldn't put me in charge of it. I'm an entrepreneur. I would not make a good manager. But you could do it. Some can do it.
I feel like yes and no. There's what was it? There's a difference between being a manager and being. It depends on the entrepreneur and what they want to do. Because it depends on, because if they are good at managing things, if that's something that does work for them, then yes. But ultimately, sometimes it's something that they need to delegate to somebody else. But at the same time, when an entrepreneur comes up with an idea, a problem they want to solve, you're going to be very picky and choosy about who you delegate to be the manager. And so it's going to be I think if you're an entrepreneur, you can be a manager, yes, if you don't know how to trust or don't know how to train. But if you can train someone to see the needs the way that you do and to see how things need to happen the way that you see it, and solve the same problems that you created to solve, then I think that you don't need to be a manager. So I think they can be manager, they don't need to be. And I think it'd be very, it's more work to be the manager because there are other things that they could be doing and other problems they could be solving.
Okay. So what are the benefits of being an entrepreneur?
I would say the maturity journey that you have to go through. I know there's the surface stuff people talk about. Oh, I set my own schedule. I'm free. I got freedom. I can spend more time with my family. No, that's not it. I mean, those are nice things, but that's not it, right? Because what happens is you go in, you start to realize that you have those things, right? Oh, I have freedom to do what I want with my time. But if you haven't gone through the maturity cycle of learning how far to push before you need to drop your pen and go home and be with your family, you're going to keep working more than you need to, right? If you haven't gone through the maturity cycle of understanding that having more free time doesn't mean a life of leisure. You get the whole Instagram, I'm working today while I'm sipping my mimosa at the beach, sitting on the hood of my Lamborghini thing, right? If you don't understand that if you don't go through the maturity journey and you're chasing that, and you're going to get, and even if you get it, right, especially if you get it, and oh, great, I got my Lambo and I got my mimosas and I'm on the beach in Hawaii. Now what? You're going to need more. And so more than what I've chosen to focus on is as often as I can, to the exclusion of the trappings, right? The trappings are cool. Don't get me wrong. I like them, first class flight is really cool. Talking with your friends. What are you doing this weekend? Oh, I'm off to a conference, stuff like that. It's cool, but it's I mean, if you're not going on that maturity journey where you learn to be content with whatever portion you have, then you're going to feel an endless amount of pressure to keep that performance up, to keep running around on the hamster wheel to get the pellet. So I would say the benefit is you become a better person if you choose to embrace it. And a lot of people don't. And that's why that's one of the reasons I think it doesn't work for so many people.
It's funny you mentioned maturity, because the second the question was posed, I was like, the song that started going through my head is "I'm gonna be a mighty king." The do whatever I want. I've got freedom. No one tell me what to do. All that stuff, and like, just, of course, satirically, I'm not like, because ultimately, it goes back to what you were talking about originally with entrepreneurship, is that ownership. If you're an entrepreneur, um, the benefits of being an entrepreneur are the ownership. It's only beneficial. I think you will only find the purest form of benefits from it if you have that ownership. Because I think people can be an entrepreneur without having that maturity and without having that ownership. So they will never reap the true benefits that being an entrepreneur can sow. But if they actually if they take that ownership, the ownership is there, and they can own the ownership or not. But I think when people do take on that role, take on that ownership, and do take on that maturity, that growth, then they can actually feel the benefits of, and actually know, oh my gosh, I've made it. Because their goal wasn't sipping mojitos on the beach. Their goal
Yeah.
was more time with their family and a problem solved at work, that now there's this thing going on, this thing that they love to do, that they can go to work and love what they do and also be enriched in their family life. And that's where their priority is. And so I think when it comes to like the benefits of being an entrepreneur, the benefits are only there if you allow that maturity, those growing pains to change you, and only if you take on the ownership that's necessary to become an entrepreneur, with the benefits.
Agreed. Jason,
I
what do
think
you
one
say?
of the I think one of the popular misconceptions about entrepreneurship is that it comes with great freedom. And I say it's a misconception because a lot of entrepreneurs begin their journey with the idea that I'm going to work for myself, which is not true. You no longer work for yourself. It's the end of yourself, because now you work for your customers,
Mm-hmm.
you work for your business partners, you work for your family and those people who are now relying on you, not your employer to pay you. They're relying on you
Mm-hmm.
to pay you. You are responsible for your employees if you choose to have employees. In
And
some ways,
don't forget
in
you
some,
work for the government as well.
well, yeah. In some ways, you are also then responsible for your vendors
Mm-hmm.
or to your vendors. So you become responsible for more things, which can be freeing in some ways if you're ready to take ownership of that. If you're not ready to take ownership of all of that, it becomes slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And that mindset of an entrepreneur, if it's too bent towards this is now mine, this is me, I think that becomes a real impediment to being a good entrepreneur. Where if it becomes, I'm responsible for this and I have a unique skill set to apply here, I'm a good creator, perhaps. And then I need to expand my skill set, like what you're talking about, Paul,
Mm-hmm.
so that I become more effective in areas I was once deficient. Then that ownership can create the freedom, because now I can make the decisions of where I spend my energies. Those decisions are not imposed necessarily upon me, but I can evaluate the landscape, evaluate all of the needs, and then prioritize those needs. So if you're a bad prioritizer, then you're going to be a bad entrepreneur.
Yep.
If you're a bad at resource utilization, you're going to be a bad entrepreneur. Because you will, you'll be like my friend who's a good at creating things and really bad at knowing if anybody cares. So he'll go create things and never having talked to anybody. And then you ask,
true.
hey, did you go talk to somebody? You're like, nope. Well, you spent a lot of money doing that. And now you're
Luigi knows
now
what
you're
you
a
need.
slave, you know? So this is real interesting that when I went into the search volume, how people actually search these things, there's if I rank it by the number of searches, quantity of searches, it's all about the definition, the spirit, the mindset. What are the characteristics? What does an entrepreneur do? And then if I rank it by the cost to get these eyeballs, there are some search volumes that are pretty low, but companies are willing to pay to get those eyeballs. And these are the top: entrepreneur classes, entrepreneur programs near me, entrepreneur schools, entrepreneur workshops near me, entrepreneur degrees, entrepreneur classes, entrepreneur classes near me, entrepreneur support organizations. Those become the those are what companies are willing to get eyeballs for. And if we add up the searches for those, there are 6,000 or so searches done every month for people looking for online courses, programs, workshops to become an entrepreneur, which gets into the question, can entrepreneurship be taught?
I have a really good. Okay. So I have this whole thing about entrepreneurship. There's different facets to it, right? There's the ability to have an idea, carry it out, and do it. You know, if you don't have your priorities straight, you won't have that ownership and you won't be able to have the full benefits of it. Technically, you're an entrepreneur, but the facet of it, like the facet of ownership, that's a different thing. So this goes into the whole saying, you can teach a man, you can give a man a fish, feed him for a day. You teach a man to fish and you feed him for his whole life. If that man is unwilling to learn how to fish, he might want somebody else to do it for him. Or like, because you gave him a fish once, why can't you keep giving him fish? Obviously, you've shown him that you're willing to give him a fish. If someone saw so this goes into, yes, fishing can be taught, but willingness can. When it comes to entrepreneurship, it can be taught to a degree, but the ownership part of it, that cannot be taught. I don't think that can't be taught. I don't think that can be taught, because I think that takes on a willingness. I think that takes on a willingness, like it can be inspired. People can be inspired. It can't be taught. I think there has to be a depth of someone wanting to learn. They have to be willing to do what it takes to take that ownership. If they don't want that ownership, you can't teach them that ownership. You can't teach them how to take that ownership. If they don't want it, if they're not in that headspace, that cannot be taught. There's nothing that can teach willingness to take on the ownership that is required to reap the true benefits of entrepreneurship. And so to a degree, yes, like the facet of like creating a successful business from scratch, that can absolutely be taught step by step. But the willingness to take the ownership to be able to reap the full benefits and the full rewards of true entrepreneurship that requires that ownership, that cannot be taught. That's in my opinion.
Similarly, I would say that the maturity journey we were talking about must be chosen. Now, you can be an entrepreneur and be, in fact, a very successful entrepreneur without really going through it. But if you're talking to those of us in the Thinker Ventures community, the whole point is the success of the holistic person, not simply the increase of their pocketbook. I mean, if we can teach people, here's how you make money. Go find people who want a product and give it to them. Go find people who are hungry for a service or a product, offer it to them. They'll buy it. I mean, that's a very gross oversimplification of how that's done, but that's the general principle. What is something the market's already paying for? Go do it, and someone will pay you for it. Yes. But that's not enough, because the human personality, all human personalities, the way human beings are wired, you will reach a saturation point with that. And you say, okay, I've done that. Now what? Now what do I do? And the way most people go off track is, well, I guess just got to do more of what I'm doing. That's not necessarily the right thing. And so I agree, Naomi, with the willingness cannot be taught. Also, the embracing of the journey as one of personal growth and maturity must be chosen. And some people might hear that and think, well, you can only choose it at the outset. No, I'm living proof. I've been battered over the head with a hammer over and over and over again until I chose it. Until I said, okay, I'm not chasing money for its own sake anymore. I'm chasing maturity. And along with that, if I remain in a growth mindset, the money will follow. And so you can, I hope everybody watching and listening can hear from what we're saying here that this is not a dollars and cents type of conversation. We have quite enough extremely wealthy, financially successful business owners who are complete jerks. Who, some of them in the public eye, very well-known people who are complete jerks, whose employees hate them, whose customers buy from them, even though they hate their companies, because they don't, like you've heard this, you've said this before, Jason, they're still treating that company as another person that they want to like, know, and trust, even though it's a company full of faceless strangers. They're still looking for some kind of connection with that company. And so they're going to that company. I'm thinking of one particular giant now where a lot of people hate them, but still buy from them. Is that, in the end, is that really all we have to look forward to, is making lots of money and being a jerk? If so, I don't want it. Particularly if it means I lose my family, I lose good relationships, nobody wants to be around me, right? It's the lesson of Ebenezer Scrooge. He had all the money, but who wanted to be around him? Nobody.
He did. He was his favorite person.
He was. And he hated himself too.
It's true. It's true. I love to bring another analogy into it when it comes to money and success. People think that health looks like skinny. Someone can be skinny, but going out to eat fast food multiple times a week and have really terrible health, like heart problems and all that stuff. Skinniness doesn't equate to health, yet so many people equate it. When I took my health journey, when my goal was weight loss, I could not obtain it. But when my goal was health and being able to get down on the floor and play with my kids and be able to get up without using my hands and without feeling like I was going to pass out, the weight coming off was a byproduct of that. Similarly, if you want to be an entrepreneur, a healthy entrepreneur who has that healthy lifestyle, who can reap the full benefits of being an entrepreneur, of having that ownership, having that lifestyle, it's going to come from what is your end goal. If your goal is money, you can get there. You can get there. But I mean, it's going to be empty. Like a lot of people who follow diets to lose weight, I think 90% of people who lose a substantial amount of weight gain it back. 90%. And if you look at it, a lot of people are following the template plan. So this kind of goes into the point I want to make is health and success and true change, I think, can be coached. I don't think it can be taught, but I think it can be coached. And what I mean by that is if a person is truly willing to listen and to do the self-reflection, I think it can be coached. They can be coached into having those thoughts for themselves, into having those conversations with themselves. So, and I think teaching is like showing, here is step A, B, and C of how you do X, Y, and Z. But coaching is, okay, why don't you try that? Why don't you figure that out? I'm here if you have any questions. Like, what do you like? And it's a guided way of learning that they're teaching themselves. And I think that is a way technically where like entrepreneurship can be learned, like not, it can't be taught, but I do think it can be coached.
And most certainly modeled too.
Yes.
The most powerful lessons I have learned about how to do this in a way that is impactful, respectful, relevant, meaningful, and people can access it is when I see someone who's better at doing it than I am, do it in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I learned to be more extroverted and talkative and interested in people and attentive to people was my first mentor. And he was exceptionally gifted at it in ways that I've never measured up to, but it hasn't mattered because I've, been able to find my own way of making conversation with strangers and meeting people in a networking setting and building relationships very, very quickly, to the point that, I can go to an event like I did here in Phoenix a week and a half ago and sit around a table of strangers and make a few basic introductions about who I am and what I do. And immediately people are like, I want to talk to you. I want to know more about what you do. Anyway, the point is the modeling of it, I would say that, can it be taught? Yes, but not always in a classroom. I think the other thing is a lot of entrepreneurs flounder because they have no real-time, real-life example showing them how it's done. And some stuff, yeah, you could show it on a YouTube video. Other stuff, you actually need to be there watching it as it happens. Because the question always comes back, when something works, why does it work? Why is it when, Naomi goes and talks to this person, they eat out of her hand. I go up to that same person, say exactly the same words that she did. Complete dud. Why?
I mean, I could give you 2 reasons for that, but you're not going to like them.
I've got plenty already that I could think of off the top of my head, Naomi. But the point is, right? You say to yourself, but the point is, you say to yourself, why does it work when one person does one thing? Because the whole thing that people are being asked to believe online is just follow these 3 simple steps. Buy my package, my coaching package for $97 a month. Follow these 3 simple steps, and you'll become a millionaire from home in your underwear. Not going to happen, cousin. Take it to the bank.
If it grows too fast, it's most likely a weed. Something that's my sister tells me that all the time. If it grows too fast, it's probably a weed. All these things where it's like, you can get success from doing X, Y, and Z. You can get success that looks like this and this quickly. It's like, if it can grow that fast, it's not lasting success. If you can drop weight that fast, those are not going to be results that are going to last. If you can, if you can do something that quickly Any lasting change is not going to be fast growing. A fast growing change is most likely a weed that will not last.
Yep.
It's going to die and shrivel up pretty darn quickly.
Slow and steady wins the race. Jason, what do you say?
So the question of whether entrepreneurship can be taught or not, my thoughts are, I have a couple thoughts. One is everything that can be taught has been done. So that leads me to the saying, the difference between those who do and those who don't is those who do, and those who don't. Yeah. So coupling that with Naomi, your thought of you can teach, I think the principles, you can impart the principles to another person, knowing and doing massively different things. So you can teach the principle, but can you teach the effort required, the discipline required? No, you can't. The willingness, you cannot teach willingness. So a person can be very book smart, know exactly what to do, have completed the courses, and still be ineffective at whatever they were taught because they just don't care or don't have the capacity. So I think the principles of entrepreneurship are really a repackaging of the principles of running a business. We call it entrepreneurship because it's a cool word. And business management is already used. So entrepreneurship is just a buzzword for how do you exploit opportunity and turn it into a business. That's what it is. We just call it entrepreneurship from a teaching standpoint. But how do you teach that? You do it. To your point, Paul, the principles of perhaps marketing or customer segmentation, that's the class I just recently taught. How do you segment and why would you segment your customer database? One of the reasons is so that you can figure out who's going to buy your product or service, and you can validate, first of all, whether your product or service if your target market even cares about your product or service, or for that matter, your message. We can teach those principles, but whether it was taught or whether it wasn't taught, it's really just an additive skill onto someone's willingness and desire to just go do it. So I can teach a skill and I might make that person better. That skill might make that person better at doing something they're already going to do. But if they're already going to do it, they're already going to do it. Yep. And every entrepreneur has within them the desire to just do it. That is one of the marks of an entrepreneur. I'm just going to go do this. And I think that comes through modeling. I'm a sort of a classical entrepreneur. That was modeled to me because my family has owned a couple small businesses for like 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was entering the workforce, I was like, well, I can just do this. I can just start selling stuff. And I never thought that I couldn't. And yet I've met many people. Their first question is their first response, if I say, hey, you could just start selling that. They're like, no, I can't do that. I'm like, all right. Well,
yeah,
I don't know what to tell you then, because whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
Which brings to mind Vincent van Gogh, popular painter, right?
Never heard
He
of him.
has a great quote. If you hear a voice within you say, you cannot paint, then by all means paint.
Yeah.
and that voice will be silenced.
Ooh,
So
that's good.
I would say this in our, as we're closing out these final minutes, a lot of people ask the question, I've heard this from people, should I be an entrepreneur? Do you think I can be an entrepreneur? The fact that you're asking the question is like the first signal that maybe you should be. You're just coming up with all sorts of reasons why you shouldn't and couldn't.
Yeah.
And yet the mark of an entrepreneur is to just go do it. If you want to do it better, go hang out with people who can model to you the spirit, the ways of thinking, the skills that you're going to need, the thought processes, the positive qualities like patience,
Mm-hmm.
How to be a good manager. Go find those people, hang out with them, and that will have a mysterious way of imparting to you this the holistic requirements of being a good entrepreneur. But you're already an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So I think, can it be taught? The skills can. The rest of it, just go do it.
Yeah.
Every other entrepreneur has just done it. 100 years ago, they didn't teach entrepreneurship. Henry Ford made up the assembly line. Is he the first person to make the assembly line? Probably not. I would argue that throughout history, any major building project that's ever been done had some element of the assembly line.
Yeah.
He organized it in a new way. And now they teach it as like, well, duh, why don't we do it this way? Because it's fast and efficient, blah, blah, blah. But he just did it. And it was really just a collection of a lot of other people's ideas that have been done for thousands of years. And then somebody said, oh, we'll call it the assembly line. It's like, all right. Ta-da.
A
Now we
division
teach
of
it.
labor. Yeah. The many hands make light work. It's ancient principle.
Absolutely. It's been done in cooking.
Yep.
For a long time. Prepare all of your stuff, put it all over here, run it down the line to get a high volume through. And it's just became a thing because, culturally we want to do everything in high volume now. But I think the mark of an entrepreneur is somebody who's just going to go do it.
Yep.
All right. We're closing in on our time here for the workshop Tuesdays at the Thinker Growth Community, where we work with faith-based founders to empower them to change the world with your product, service, or your message. Thanks for joining us, faculty members, on this workshop. Any final thoughts you guys want to get out of your heads? Anything you're sitting on right now that you want to just push into the world? Now's your opportunity.
One of the key things that separates human beings, by saying this, I want to reinforce what you're saying, Jason. I think all of humanity is an entrepreneurial race of beings. Even people who are much more likely to be employees. But here's why. One of the key things that separates us from animals, if you take a pack of dogs and you take one milk bone and you throw it into the center of them, right? We all know what's going to happen. The dogs are going to jostle over it, and whoever gets it, right? And that's fine. This is not casting aspersion on dogs. That's what dogs do. They're created that way. But human beings don't have to be like that. We can become animalistic and all that. Or the smarter, maybe I shouldn't say the smarter, but maybe the more entrepreneurial among us will say, maybe I'm willing to forego the tidbit that's been thrown into it in exchange for something else. I have a different need. I don't need that reward. You can have it if I can have this. right? We trade with each other. Animals don't trade. You'll never find monkeys trading a banana. Doesn't happen. But we do. And that's one of the things I think, if you're looking, if you're hearing what Jason says there, just go do it. We're not talking about go and file an LLC. We're not talking about go and, buy a bunch of equipment like a cash register or something. We're talking about go and find a way to exchange value with another person, because that is at the very elemental core of entrepreneurship, is serving God's other children, finding out what they need and offering in exchange. So the value goes both ways. And most of the time, right, when you're an entrepreneur, the exchange that should come to you is money. I can do all of that for you if you, and this is what I'll charge. What do you think? And they'll either tell you yes or no. But that's one of the things that is entirely unique to humanity, and that's what gives me confidence to say all of us can be entrepreneurial, in that we can solve problems for our fellow human beings in exchange for something we need.
Naomi, any thoughts you're sitting on?
Yeah. Prove yourself wrong. I think everyone should just prove themselves wrong. Because there's that saying, you can, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Prove yourself wrong. If it's something that's holding you back, prove yourself wrong. If you think you're incapable, prove yourself wrong. If you think you can't do it, if you think a 6x6 puzzle cube is unsolvable, prove yourself wrong. Prove yourself wrong. Whatever task you're taking on, prove yourself wrong. I dare you.
All right. Well, I'll close with this thought that was not on my mind until Paul, you started talking about monkeys. And then my brain wrote a song, and it goes like this. It's just the hook.
Do it.
We trade bananas. Da-da-da-da. We trade bananas. Ba-da-ba-da. We trade. Yeah, that's just the hook. Okay.
Okay, it'll be our theme song for
Is that from the
growth.
Muppet Show or something like that?
I don't know. It's we trade bananas.
It sounds
That's
like
my
something
thought.
that would show up on the Muppets or something.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, this has been the workshop. Happens every Tuesday here in the Thinker Growth community. Thanks, Paul and Naomi, two of faculty members, for joining us today. Today, we've missed Ryan, who is traveling. He's actually around the world right now. He's in London. And TC, who's also going to be joining us. And then Kachin is actually going to be joining us here soon on the workshop, where we enable faith-based entrepreneurs to change the world with your product, service, your message. So if you've got a question that you think you need an answer for, ask it in the community. Join us at thinkergrowth.com. Catch us on social media as well. Tune in every Tuesday. And also catch on some of our online lives that we do periodically with other entrepreneurs in the community who want to spread their product, service, or message to make people aware of the great thing that they're doing. So thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.
See you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.